Greetings. My name is Eugene Dean, and welcome to Community Conversations. Today we have a special episode. We're focusing on masks, mandates, and we're talking to some moms today. So let me just welcome the moms in. Greetings, moms. How are you today?
Greetings, Eugene.
Morning.
Pretty good.
Yes, greetings, and welcome to the show. So let me first go through introducing everyone. First, we have in the top right corner, we have Clare Panchaud, who is a holistic health coach and qualified aromatherapist who assists her clients in creating a healthy lifestyle through long-term habit change. Welcome, Clare.
Thank you. And a mom of three. So
Yes.
my most
Definitely.
important goal of all.
Yes, the most important part. Yes, definitely. All right. So next we have Tracey, who's a former educator who has taught in public and private schools here in Bermuda and also abroad. In light of the recent mandates, she has decided to leave mainstream education. Welcome, Tracey Givens.
Grand Rising. Thank you for
Yes.
having me.
Okay. And then we have Megan Burden, a proud wife and mother of two. Megan is an early childhood educator with a background in developmental services. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, great. All right. So, as I said, today, this special episode, we're talking about mask mandates in schools. So, Tracey, would you mind just letting us know what these mandates are to give context to the conversation?
Sure. So, regardless of whether you're in phase 1, which is community transmission, or phase 4, no confirmed cases, all students in public and private education must do the following when it comes to mask use. They must, all students in the morning, in morning care or after school, must wear their face masks when indoors at all times. If they are lining up to go into school or coming out or around the building, they also must wear their masks. It also says staff must wear masks when they're indoors and less than 6 feet away from others when outdoors in the fresh air. It also states that when they're lining up for transportation while on a minibus to go on a minibus or public transportation, they must wear a mask. Now, also, I want you to be aware that a minibus does not have seats in 6 feet apart. Non-surgical or cloth masks only around the neck, over the nose, gaiters, or any kind of mask that have vents are not allowed. So regardless of when what a child's doing or when they're in school from 8:30 to 3:30 on the way to school in any sort of transportation, they are supposed to be masked. I think that's a little bit crazy, but that's what they are saying. So
All right. So is that all the mandates or is it?
That's just the one about masks. There are other mandates that comes to staff. There are other mandates that states that students can't share textbooks or you can't share pens or color pencils or things like that. And that poses a problem for parents who aren't able to buy those things for their students. You know, I know when I was teaching, I would have a box of color pencils or crayons. And I would have a class set of dictionaries and textbooks. Even the government does not supply a textbook for every student. In my subject, there wasn't anyway. We had to share amongst the students in the school. So to have these mandates and then to say you must do A, B, and C and not provide if you're so concerned about transmission, to me, that leads some questionable mandates. Like why are you doing this? What does it really mean for government to push these things when they're not supplying their own schools with the proper amount of resources for students to be safe?
Okay. So just listening to what you were saying there just now, Tracey, are you saying that the mandates now prevent or restrict teachers from being able to share, products with the students to kind of bridge the gap on shortcomings within supplies in the schools?
Yes. So everyone's supposed to have their own pencil crayons, their own color pencils, their own textbook, their own. But yes, that's what it's actually. But when a teacher signs in for school in the morning, they all use the same pen.
Right.
But yes, that's what they're asking for.
I see.
And students are supposed to wear masks all the time, but the windows are supposed to be wide open to let fresh air in, regardless of what time of year it is. They're not supposed to be touching anybody else's desk, or, some teachers have, if you touch their desk, they'll wipe it off right away. So yeah, it's quite invasive for me as a teacher, I always felt that when you are sending your child to school, I'm the one who's going to take care of your child. And during my career, I have been a lot of mommies to a lot of different kids who still check up with me and still call me auntie or whatnot, because I was concerned about their welfare. And now I find that everybody is so afraid of a virus that hasn't been isolated that nobody is looking out for the children. Everybody is only looking inward at themselves and taking care of themselves. No one is taking care of the children. If you're a teacher, if you're an educator, your job is to do what the parents can't do because they're not there. So that, as a teacher, was the most concerning thing for me, that no one was looking out for the well-being of the kids. And at this point, I'm talking about the psychological health. You have a mask on their faces all day. They can't talk to the friends. They can't play with the friends in another year level. You're telling everybody that if you have on a mask, you're sick, and so you must stay away from me. How do you think that affects their mental health? Talking about that.
Right. So Tracey, I'll ask this. When you were in school still teaching, how much input were teachers really allowed to give to the process? Did these mandates come out of like collaborative decisions, or were they being imposed on the schools externally, i.e. from the government or the ministry and things of that nature?
They were imposed on us by the health department, and sometimes that was problematic because they didn't take into consideration that each school physically looks different. So, for example, in primary school, the kids only have one teacher, and that teacher teaches everything. So you can have what you call a bubble. But once you leave primary school, you have different teachers for everything. There's no such thing as a bubble anyway. Once you leave your house, if you don't work with who you live with, there are no bubbles. But if you're talking about within school, those mandates were very difficult for a lot of the administration to do, because they would give a blanket rule, but it didn't fit every scenario.
I see. Yeah, very interesting. We had a few comments coming in, why can you remove your mask when seated in a restaurant, but you can't remove your mask when seated in class? So yeah, I guess it does become difficult. It's been a very complex situation. There's been a number of different mandates that have been put on the table, and everyone's just been left to kind of contend with these, So what about parental involvement? I've seen in other countries around the world where parents have been invited to forums to, I guess, express their views or concerns about mandates. In your knowledge, has anything of that nature been made available to parents locally?
I have not been aware of that. No, not in the school that I was in. It was, this is the rule that's coming down from Ministry of Health, so this is what we have to do. End of story. So no, a lot of parents were not happy, but they weren't given the choice to voice their opinion or to come up with an alternate solution.
All right. So very interesting. So no parental involvement at all. So let's bring some of the parents, some of the other parents back in. Let's see. So we have Claire and Megan. So Claire and Megan, what do you have to say about these mandates that Tracey just read out? Claire, do you have any particular comments?
Yeah. So here's the interesting thing. I believe from the first draft that came out, and I think it's still the case, that basically year 1s and 2s, so primary one and primary 2, do not have to wear their masks all day until they get into phase 1 and probably phase 2, which right now we're going into phase 2, right? So I'll have to relook at that. But you know, so there's certain points where they aren't having to mask all day, but the older ones are, which my son, my eldest son, would fall into the one that would have to mask all day. And I actually emailed their principal, their school principal, and I expressed my concern. And I said, you know, this is really disheartening, because I understand, you know, if they're in assemblies, or if they are moving around the school, going into school, exiting school. My concern was when they're sat at the desk and they're trying to concentrate, right? Like, let's face it. And they've said, like Tracey said, they're going to be having the windows open and just the fresh air. But that highly relies on a good breeze. And if we are not getting a good breeze coming through the windows, it's stagnant air, and it's hot and it's humid. We all know, we all have experienced wearing those masks, being somewhere outside or wherever in a hot, humid environment. And these kids are going to be sat there trying to concentrate on their work, trying to focus, trying to learn, and yet also having this mask. It's going to make them even hotter. And I just don't understand how that's going to be very conducive for a great learning environment, how they're going to be able to focus properly. So that does put that kind of concern for me. Is my child going to really be able to learn and focus and concentrate on his work? And then as well, I'm thinking about, well, like my son's very soft-spoken, or what if the teacher is trying to explain something, she has her mask on and they don't understand. There's an understanding difference where they don't quite understand. And my son might not be the one to put his hand up and say, I'm sorry, but I didn't hear you. And there may be some kids that would, but not everyone will. And then likewise, the other way, when the teacher asks questions and they're supposed to give responses, what if the teacher can't hear the kids because they're with their mask on, the ones that are soft-spoken? So I just feel that there's going to be an impact on their learning ability, number one, as well. And the hot and the heat, and we all know what that feels like. It's uncomfortable. Majority of people that are wearing them all day are adults, number one, and that can do that. Not all of them can, and most of them have admitted that they can't, especially when it's hot and humid. And so it's really unfair to kind of put these things on such young children, in my view, when it's really going to impact their everyday. And we don't have an end in sight. That's big, really big for me, is that we don't have an end in sight on this. We don't know. We can't say, oh, well, in 2 weeks, 3 months, 6 years, this is going away, because it's not. So at what point do we say we will lift these mandates off? Or are they going to be stuck there forever?
Well, that's a very good point. What are you hearing from other mothers? Because obviously we have 3 mothers on the show today, but you know, there are literally thousands of parents who are out there and they're faced with making decisions around these mandates. So what are you hearing? Is the general sense in I guess the communities that you frequent that people are appreciative of the mandates being put in place, or is there more concern?
So I think it's really there's everything. There's a mix. We all have different experiences, different thoughts, different everything, right? So I spoke with a mom that I know that has a daughter in the same class as my son, and she said her older son had to wear wear them all day. Now he's probably in middle school. And he was totally fine with it. Now, here's the thing. In that middle school ages, in high school ages, I don't believe that the students will be wearing the mask properly all day long. I'm pretty sure they'd be pulling them down, having them under their chin or taking them off or whatever throughout the day. So maybe the fact that they've been okay with it is because they've been like, well, we're not really going to just use them properly. But my son, at the age that he's at, I can see where he would be more compliant. And is that going to be to his detriment? You know, so, and I get it. And there's other parents, like you said, Eugene, there's all these other parents that have different views. And there's some parents that I've literally said to me, I'd be concerned if my kids weren't wearing masks all day, because they're very afraid of this virus, which they were afraid for themselves, but now they're afraid for their children. And as we know, as a parent, you'd rather something harm you than harm your kids in an instant. So that fear for them is very real. And we need to understand that and respect that, because we've literally, as you and I have discussed before, Eugene, we've been bombarded by mainstream media and governments and from around the world globally, where this virus has basically we've been told how scary it is, how life-threatening it is. And so parents are genuinely concerned about their kids' physical health. But I think what we're trying to shed a light on is, you know, the kids that were wearing masks all the time weren't even wearing them correctly to begin with. So let's face it, are they really being protected? I guess we need to look at things like, do the masks really work as well as we assume them to? And what are the long-term causes of wearing masks all the time? You know, we need to look at all those sort of things. So I think just having a broader conversation right now of understanding what this could look like for our kids and what the long-term effects are is really key, instead of just thinking this is going to protect my kid from getting the virus. Because here's the thing that Oxford has even said. They've come out like this past week and said it is inevitable, and they use the word inevitable, that we will all catch COVID-19, whatever variant that may be. But it is inevitable because it isn't going anywhere, because we can't eradicate it, because it does live in animals as well as humans. So if it is inevitable that we're all going to get it, are we actually just prolonging this process by using things such as masks and having all these mandates put in place? Are we prolonging this? Are we shutting down our immune systems in the meantime so that we can't fully fight it because we're stopping ourselves from actually our bodies from doing what it should do naturally?
Well, yeah, that's a very valid point. And I'm going to bring Megan in a second, but I'll just say this about that. Claire, obviously you're a holistic health practitioner. So you've put a lot of energy and effort on your lifestyle, the lifestyle of your family. So with that in mind, I'm sure you feel a lot more confident than maybe most about your immune system and its capacity to deal with any kind of external viruses or ailments or things of that nature. And I guess maybe there are just some people who don't have that confidence because they haven't invested that much time in their health and well-being. And as a result, they find themselves somewhat paralyzed in fear, you know? So just in all, it appears that one of the main things that we're going to have to do just across the board is to help to restore calm and confidence back into the community, because this pandemic has really just driven fear up in unprecedented levels, you know, all around the world. So I'm just going to bring Megan in just to get her views real quick. Oops. Let's see. Greetings, Megan. How are you?
Thank you.
Okay. So Megan, we've heard a bit from Tracey. And then we just heard a bit from Claire. You know, what are your thoughts on the comments so far, and how do you feel about the mask mandates in schools?
So I will start my conversation. You know, all of these preventions. There's one area that I would like to talk about first. So with the new changes to the border control protections, if a household with their children were to travel and come back to the island, whether the parents have been vaccinated or not, they need to wait until day 10 before returning to school. However, if the parents travel, they can come back home to their children. They don't need to wait for arrival, day 4, day 10, for their children to go back to school, camps, nursery, whatever. So I don't see protection there. You know, there are people coming into this country that are vaccinated, that are testing positive throughout the days that they have to test, and their children have just gone to school. So if you want to talk about protecting schools, I feel like that needs to be the first thing to be looked at, because it's just not there. And then when you get into the other protections that they've done, like the masking, there are potential dangers and harms, and they shouldn't be overlooked. You know, there's different guidance, and they say that children 5 and under shouldn't wear masks. Then why in phase 1 are P1s who are 5 years old being asked to mask? It just, the actual guidance doesn't even line up there. You know, I base a lot of what I understand off of the science and the data. And there have been a lot of studies on effectiveness, potential dangers and harms, and the whole mental health thing. These children have been through a lot. You know, how are the schools addressing that and supporting them through all of this? You know, my experience last year with, you know, certain things that Claire had talked about, being at a desk, wearing a mask, concentrating on breathing. In the beginning for my daughter, like she just couldn't, like she couldn't focus on her schoolwork because she was, you know, really uncomfortable. She got a lot of headaches. And then, you know, unfortunately, there were punishments for her trying to breathe, you know, taking off her mask to take a break to try to breathe. There were punishments. She got detention. You know, I did bring that up to the school when I learned that this was going to continue. And I did get a good response. And I feel like I'm interested to see where it goes. But I wish that it were a choice. You know, if you want your child to wear a mask, then fine. If you feel like it's going to protect them, then you should have that choice. And teachers, you know, you can get vaccinated, you can wear masks to protect yourself. You know, I don't understand why it can't be a choice. If that's what you feel is going to protect you, then you should be able to do that. And if you feel like it's not necessary because, you know, you've looked into maybe the potential harms and dangers, and the other thing is long term. People don't know what this is going to do long term, physically and mentally. And I feel like it just needs to be a part of the conversation. And I feel like more people need to speak up. I have a lot of different friends in different areas, you know, that have done their part for this, you know, the community. They've done what they've been asked to. They've vaccinated themselves and their children. And then, but they're still being continued to mask, and it doesn't add up for a lot of people. So I feel like there's a lot of different areas that people need to question things and maybe speak up more. You know, as a collaboration, people are going to have more of an effect if we come together instead of just keeping quiet on these things.
We have some comments coming in. So some of the viewers are saying great discussion. So thank you guys for sharing. Definitely. I know that, Megan, this is not necessarily always the easiest thing to do, that speaking up. That's been something that's been a huge topic of discussion, actually. The lack of speaking up that's going on in the community. Claire spoke a bit about in her circles how there's kind of like mixed views on the whole scenario. And I hear you leaning more into, well, you know, if we have choice, then we can use the things that are best suited for us. And so I asked this to Tracey, but I didn't ask Claire, but has there been any opportunity for you to interact with anyone at your child's school about the mandates, to even have like a conversation about concerns? Has there been kind of like an open channel for conversation, maybe somebody appointed to discuss these things, or any room for input?
I've been made aware of the person, you know, that I should go to when I have concerns or input. But at the end of the day, the recommendations come from the Ministry and Department of Health. And that is the guidance that you're given. That's what you make your policies off of, and that's what people are following. A question I have to that is, if you do see long-term damages to children, whether it be physical or mental, whose responsibility is that? You know, if my child has a long-term health problem from this guidance, who am I going to go to take responsibility for that? Are the schools going to be liable? Is the government going to be liable? That's another big question. I feel like, you know, it's that should be addressed as well. You know, there are many areas to mask, like I said, from the science and the data on both sides, but there are actual physical negative effects that, especially long-term, all day, every day, what is that going to do physically? And if there is something wrong down the road with my child, who is going to be responsible for that? You know, these are recommendations as far as I'm concerned. And, you know, private schools, or, you know, obviously public schools are going to follow government guidance. And do private schools have to? Like, is it, you know, like a legality? I don't know. But I know that there are a lot of people that don't feel that their children should wear masks. And that's what I'm saying. It should be a choice. But in terms of who do you go to, the Ministry and Department of Health, they're the ones making the rules. So that's kind of, regardless of you expressing your concerns to the school, you know, they could assure you that they're going to get mask breaks. Okay, so what does that actually look like? How often? You know, last year outside, they were to mask if they were not 6 feet apart. They haven't said that this year. But, you know, at their desks are distant. So why can they not take it off at the desk? You know, if it can't be a choice and they have to wear it walking around, fine. Like, I would be more okay with that, but let them take it off at their desk. But then there's the other side, the teachers and the development of children. They need to see you speak. So it, you know, I can speak on both sides of that as an educator, especially, you know, in early childhood, when you're teaching children to develop their language skills, not teaching, but you're in the environment and yes, teaching, but they need to see, they can't, you know, and there have been studies done to say that this has developmentally negatively affected children. So as far as there was a study done on like IQs and stuff like that. So everything that's being done, you know, in the beginning, pediatricians on the island even said, like, this is not affecting children like that. You know, with the Delta variant, maybe they've seen a rise in cases of children, but healthy children still are not being affected. So yeah, it just doesn't really add up for me.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Megan, for sharing. Now we have a few videos lined up to share, because obviously this is an issue that is being experienced all around the world. But first, I just wanted to ask you this, Tracey, in reference to the ministry, because we're trying to pinpoint like who you reach out to. Are you aware of anyone in particular at the Ministry of Education who is like a contact person, or any particular, I guess, department or team where you can call and have a conversation about these mandates and ask questions and things of that nature?
whenever documentation was sent out via email, it was sent from the commissioner, but she was told by the Ministry of Health. So as far as I'm concerned, the Ministry of Health is who you would have to contact if you had any concerns, questions, queries. Note, everybody, that these are mandates. Mandates are not rules. As a person, you have the power to say you don't want this. A mandate is not a law. But I don't think a lot of people realize that. And if enough people push back and say, I don't want this for my child, you know what? My child's like, come to school for a week. I'm going to teach them at home, or I'm going to find something else until you sort your stuff out. They're just trying you. You cannot sit back and let them take your children, because that's what they're trying to do.
Right. All right. So thank you, Tracey. Let's jump into some of these videos, and then we can have conversation around that. First, we had a video from a doctor. So let's bring that up really quickly.
Hey everybody, Greg Schmades here. I'd like to talk real briefly and help you walk through the evidence on mask wearing. I think this is really important. I'm here in New Mexico. Our governor just mandated another time for mask wearing for people indoors. And the CDC, as well as some other sources, are claiming to have evidence to wear masks. And so as an evidence-based physician, I'm indifferent to wearing a mask or not. I wear a mask all day at work anyway as a surgeon, and I just want to do what the evidence shows. The evidence I've seen is overwhelmingly in favor of saying that masks worn by the general public out in public places, they don't work. And so I was confused as to why the CDC claims to have this data. So I just thought real quick, I would for one listed study would be some big prospective trial and follow up on patients and testing people for COVID. And I like, it's hard not to kind of laugh here. This is their #1 paper that they cite when they claim to have evidence that masks reduce COVID transmission. An investigation of a high exposure event in which 2 ill hairstylists, and that's CDC's #1 top paper that they cite to claim that masks work. #2, 124 Beijing households. I'm just reading straight from the website here, okay? 124 Beijing households. And then down here, a retrospective study on an outbreak at the USS Theodore Roosevelt. I actually took the time to look up that paper and read it. It was self-reported from the 382 U.S. Navy people that were on that aircraft carrier, and it was just self-reported on a piece of paper. Did you kind of wear a mask or not?
All right, I'm sorry. A couple of people were saying they couldn't hear the sound, so let me just try to share that again. So apologies, everyone, for that. So I'll take it back a little bit because I figure we missed a little bit of it.
And follow up on patients and testing people for COVID. And I it's hard not to kind of laugh here. This is their #1 paper that they cite when they claim to have evidence that masks reduce COVID transmission. An investigation of a high exposure event in which 2 ill hairstylists two ill hairstylists, and that's CDC's #1 top paper that they cite to claim that masks work. #2, 124 Beijing households. I'm just reading straight from the website here, okay? 124 Beijing households. And then down here, a retrospective study on an outbreak at the USS Theodore Roosevelt. I actually took the time to look up that paper and read it. It was self-reported from the 382 U.S. Navy people that were on that aircraft carrier, and they was just self-reported on a piece of paper. Did you kind of wear a mask or not? And that was it. Okay, so that is the data right here that they're claiming. They have a list of they just have a paragraph here. You can go to the website, Google it yourself, of supposedly all these studies, and they have a table that goes down. I'm going to switch the camera over here so you can see this. This is really important because in public health, look at this, just the month of May, the month of March only, February to March, April to May. Here's a bigger one, January to August, but all this study is just when Arizona had this mandatory mask wearing, and it's a temporal association. So, I mean, they have no proof that COVID cases would have changed during that time, regardless of that. It's just an observational study. So in public health, the problem with what the CDC is doing in listing these studies is that they have these studies that are just a few months of a snapshot of what the virus is doing. That's not how we do public health. We're talking about long-term data. You can't just cherry pick a few months. And so the study that I like to cite is the Denmark study. And I'm going to wrap this up. This is the very, very important point when we have this discussion. If you scroll up on this website, once again, the CDC's live website where they claim to have this data, they actually attack the Denmark study that I like to cite. Remember, this is the authoritative study where they designed the study from the get-go and then performed the study prospectively. That's very important. In medicine, it's considered a lower level of evidence just to look back on the past and say, let's try to gather the data. If you design your study from the get-go, it's much more high-quality data. Here's what's important, and this is very concerning to me, very concerning. The Denmark study was 3,030 people. 3,030. And if you read on their website right now, and I quote, okay, the study was too small, end quote. That's what the CDC says. It was too small. And the studies that they cite on their website, 382 U.S. Navy men and women, 2 hairstylists, 124 Beijing households. And they're saying that the Denmark study was too small. I don't know. I don't even know what to say about it. It's just, I think they don't think people will actually go through and read these papers. I really don't know. But now this is a nice review of what the CDC is saying. We've got to think critically. I want to reinstate trust in the CDC. We need the CDC in America. We need sound science and academic inquiry. So please go over this website with your friends and family, with your coworkers, doctors, get into the hospitals, go talk to your patients about this, please. Because it's black and white. It's right there on their website. You can go look it up right now. All right. Thank you very much. Hope that was helpful. Bye-bye.
Yeah, so that was very interesting. It's a U.S. doctor and surgeon that was speaking. And I just need to bring this up because early out in the pandemic, there were a lot of questions about the validity of mask wearing. And what we found is that anyone who said anything or questioned anything about masks was quickly scolded and told, that we need to trust the science. So I reached out to a few local doctors, and what was interesting is that a few local doctors told me the exact same thing that this doctor just said in this video. The local doctors that I spoke to said, well, Eugene, I trust the science as well. My concern is how many people have actually seen the science and know the science, you know? And if you haven't actually studied the science yourself, then what you end up doing is trusting the scientists, or you trust the politician that trusts the scientists, you know? And so when I looked at that same data, you know, I found myself confused as well, because I'm saying the whole world is wearing masks. Like it was unbelievable to me that we had the entire world wearing masks. And when I looked at the studies that the CDC was citing as evidence for the credibility of mask wearing, it was laughable, really. And so, is that news to you, or are you guys familiar with this information? And do you find that people in your circles are familiar with this? Because if people are, then I can genuinely understand where the concerns would come from.
Yeah, so I'll say this. During the press conference with the Minister of Health and Minister of Education, she did advise people to go to the UK's website to find the studies on masks. But guess what? The UK isn't masking children. So I just found that a bit interesting. But yeah.
Okay.
And for me, it depends on which group of people I'm with. You know, like I have a group of friends who think like me, and I have people in my life who don't think like me. So you really have to figure out where you're going to get your information. And people need to realize that, like you said, people that were against masks and what they do got shoved off of mainstream media and YouTube and Facebook, and had to go somewhere else to get to be heard. And there's nothing wrong with finding information elsewhere. I actually found some documentation the other day, 34 studies, one from 1920, and talking about how masks have not proved to be efficient enough to warrant compulsory application for the tracking of epidemics. And that's from 1920. Of course, there are a few from last year, and then from this year, from August 18th, school mask mandates. Same thing, that they don't work.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like masks have been a controversial subject from the beginning. And obviously there's a reason for that. And, you know, in the US, all of these school board meetings where you have parents, you know, speaking their truths and trying to advocate for their children and having, you know, the overall well-being looked at. Obviously, if there's this many people trying to say something, there's something to look at.
So let's now that you, Claire, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to kind of add, like, slightly touch on that. Is like basically another thing to consider is what's on these masks. Like, what are these masks made of? And we have talked so much about microplastics in the last few years. It's become very common knowledge that the clothes we wear, our sheets and bedding, even our toothpaste and certain beauty products contain microplastics. Our drinking water, you know, things like that, especially plastic bottled water. So we are inundated with microplastics already. And what exactly are on these masks that we're putting exactly over our nose and our mouths and the nose and mouths of the children? They are literally, and I have one right in front of me. And the only thing, there's a lot of like Chinese, Japanese or something, but the only thing they really actually say on here is polypropylene fabric. So, which is basically a tiny plastic, small plastic fibers.
Right.
And if we're inhaling that and our kids are inhaling that constantly, what are the long-term physical effects of that?
Right.
Yeah. So what Claire, like, I'll touch on what Claire is talking about. So those nanofibers that go into the lungs, you know, they are similar to asbestos, and they can cause tumors and different types of cancers. And, you know, if you have your child in one of those masks all day, every day, what is that going to do long term? or short term.
Mm-hmm. The other thing too for me is that when someone puts a mask on your face, you can't talk. So it's a signal to shut up, don't talk. So if you're looking at it from a psychological point of view, nobody wants to hear you. Be quiet. That's what the powers that be are trying to tell everybody. We're doing something, shut up. And that's also what people aren't looking at. If we're talking about safety, and we're talking that everything's, nothing's meshing, nothing making sense, because it's not about a mask and it's not about a virus. It's about us telling you what to do and you have to do it. This is my opinion, but this is how I see things.
Well, I think you have some valid points there, Tracey. I think, reflect on this, the school system in Bermuda has been challenged for a number of years now. Anyone who's been tracking education in Bermuda can see that there's clearly been a decline in the quality of public school education. We've actually created a huge market for private school education in Bermuda that didn't exist before. And if you look historically, then successful schools have generally been schools where you have a good balance between input from government, whose primary role is to facilitate or to help to facilitate, but most importantly is input from teachers and from parents. And what I'm hearing from all of you here is that there are no clear, inroads for teachers or parents to give input into this process. So the concern is that the failings of our education system have come from, external mandates made up from people who don't understand the intimate dynamics of each individual school. And this is just a replication of that same ailment that has been, I guess, causing a decline in the quality of our school system over the years. So thank you guys again for sharing. Let's just go to a couple videos. You mentioned parents and school boards. So let's see what some parents are saying in other countries where they're actually being given the opportunity to speak.
From a community member in Nashville and a father of four. You and the school board have decided that our kids should go to school all day, every day, wearing muzzles like rabid dogs. I have listened to your arguments, and I've noticed that they're missing a few things, namely evidence, data, science, common sense, and basic human decency. You've presented no facts at all, so let me do that now. Here they are. COVID poses almost no risk to our kids at all. 4.2 million children have tested positive for COVID. A total of 0.008% of them have died. Overall, 0.0004% of the child population in this country, I'm talking right now, in this country has died of COVID. Twice as many have died by drowning each year. A bathtub poses more risk to your child than COVID. Your child is far more likely to die in the car on the way to school than he is to die from COVID at school. What about the flu? The CDC estimates that 480 kids died from the flu in the 2018-2019 season. That's more than have died from COVID in a year and a half. Now, did anyone on this board suggest at any point that year that kids wear masks? Did anyone in this room suggest that at any point anyone wear masks for flu, which again is more dangerous to kids than COVID? That's a fact. Now, do you know what it's called when you force your children to wear masks for fear of a virus that poses almost no threat to them? It's called child abuse. You want to look up a disease, look up Munchausen by proxy, because that's what this is. If you think I'm exaggerating, then how would you respond to a parent who forced his kid to wear a football helmet every day, all day, for fear of falling coconuts and meteors? Your kid is almost as likely to die of COVID as he is from a rock from the sky, and yet if you saw that, you would say to that parent that he is abusive, that he is forcing his kid to participate in this utterly insane charade in order to satisfy his delusional, psychotic hypochondria. Now, do any of you know what sort of psychological damage we do to children by forcing them to cover their faces, teaching them that the air is toxic, that everyone around them is sick, depriving them of the ability to see each other's faces? Do you know what kind of damage that does? Have you thought about it? Have you wondered about the health effects of forcing kids to breathe through sweat and spit and dirt-soaked rags every single day? Are you sure that there are no health risks? Do you know what the effect is on children developmentally if they're not able to read each other's facial cues? What about learning to read and they can't see the teacher enunciating the words? What does it do to a child's developing immune system if he has to wear a mask all day, every day? Have you taken any of this into consideration at all? Well, you haven't. You're satisfied to place this burden on children anyway. And why? It's not to keep them safe. They are safe. It's not to keep the adults safe. They can all get vaccinated if they want. No, you do it to make yourselves feel better and to protect yourselves politically. The child's mask is a symbolic security blanket for you, not them. It's a disgrace and you should all be ashamed. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, so obviously very passionate comments from that parent there, but also a lot of facts. So this is someone who has done a lot of studying. I said to, or one of my friends said to me and said, you know, just about everyone now has a PhD in COVID now, because people have been entrenched in so much research, and it's all there and it's available. So you see this parent speaking passionately about the things that they have understood. There's been an interesting comment that came in. It says, my friend with kids in Netherlands said his son never wore a mask and he's 11. And my friend teacher in Sweden, last time I checked, never wore a mask either. The UK isn't requiring masks in school. So why are we following the US on this? It makes no sense. And where are the US states now? Not even all the states are doing it. So what do you guys have to say to that comment and also from the passionate, I guess, submission made by that parent to the school board?
I feel like I will say this, and pediatricians across the island would agree. There have been more hospitalizations in children for things that are not COVID. You know, parainfluenza, rhinoviruses, croup, I've heard of RSV. More children on the island have been hospitalized from things other than COVID. You know, and even before the flu and all these things, like, you didn't do that then. Why are you doing it now? And that's the question, why? You know, why? But even if you ask why, look, at the end of the day, it should just be a choice. So.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the thing is, there are a lot of things, and like Megan's touched on, is that there are so many other things that are affecting our children in harmful ways, in deaths and things like that we obviously do. And we don't want our kids to suffer in any sort of way. But the thing that we really need to consider here is that none of us are worried or thinking all the time, oh my gosh, if my child gets X other disease, RSV or croup or whatever the other respiratory issues that they're presenting with, we're not worried about those. We're not stressing over those. And so it's only because COVID has been literally put in our faces day after day, time after time, and we're having to, and I feel that we're having to do our own research, Eugene. This is why you made that comment that someone said to you, we feel like we all have PhDs in this, is because we have never needed to before or felt the need to really entrench ourselves to find the answers, to try and find and make some sort of sense out of this. Because here's the thing, we keep saying we're following the science, but I've yet to actually see any of that science from those officials that are saying that. We see the data that they would like to present to us of how many people have gotten sick, how many people have COVID, how many deaths. That's the data they want to present. But when they actually look at the science, I don't see them presenting that. Mm-hmm. And so we felt that we had to take it upon ourselves to dig deep and find some answers, because we have lots of questions.
The thing that concerns, sorry.
Go ahead, Tracey.
What concerns me the most in all of this is that we're losing our way as a community. There are 2 times during a year where Bermudians hang together, like I'm Bermudian, hot match and a hurricane. And this has just people, like, you meet someone and that's a topic of conversation, which really is nobody's business. You know, what you think about anything, or whether you've had a certain medical procedure or not. And because people are so concerned about it, because you're bombarded with it 24/7 in the news. Well, not so much now, because we don't have those press conferences that people were just, you know, making everybody fearful. But it's creating this division in our community, and this is not how we're going to overcome this. We need to get together and recognize that you make a choice for your body and I make my choice for my body, and that's okay. Whatever you choose is none of your business, and whatever you choose is okay for you. And we need to start accepting that, and not making it making a person who chooses something different from mainstream a pariah.
Thank you, Tracey. So we have one more video I'd just like to play. This one is interesting. It's another school board meeting. So what I can say is that it's good to see that at least in other places that there are opportunities for people to give input, or at least express their concerns. But this time we have a doctor who's also a parent.
It's Dr. Rhea Gari. So it's nice to finally meet you all in person. I'm sure you've enjoyed reading the emails that I've sent to you over the last year. So my name is Dr. Rhea Gari. I've been practicing medicine for over 20 years. I am a double board certified physician with firsthand experience in the management of COVID-19. I'm also a community member and a mother of 3 teenage boys. I'm here to help you understand the issues surrounding the masking of our children in our schools. First, a few points for you all to consider. You on the school board have decided that our children should go to school all day, every day, wearing masks like they're some sort of infectious disease spreaders, which they're not. You are supposedly basing this on ridiculous CDC recommendations, which are not at all backed by science. I spent a lot of my time trying to understand your reasoning, and must say it's quite angering that you are even discussing the possibility of masking our children again for an entire year. As our elected officials, your reasoning is missing a few things, namely evidence, science, common sense, and basic human decency. So let me educate you all on some of the facts. First, masks and face coverings do not work. They just don't work. They don't work in preventing the spread of any viral illness. This was determined in part from at least 3 NIH-funded studies that clearly demonstrate that coronavirus and all other respiratory viruses are spread by aerosol particles, which are small enough to go through any mask. Next, COVID is never going away. Do all of you realize that? So pathogens with an animal reservoir cannot be eradicated. Are you planning on recommending masks for our children indefinitely? I'm sure the parents here have a big problem with that if you are. Next, masks absolutely cause harm to our children, including, but not limited to, increased bacterial and viral infections, hypoxia, which is a lack of oxygen, hypercapnia, which is increased CO2 retention, dizziness, headaches, syncope, which is passing out, shortness of breath, anxiety, and brain damage to our younger children, just to name a few. I could go on though. Next, even if you all think that masks work, you know that none of the children are wearing the mask properly. You all know that. Next, COVID poses almost no risk to our children at all. 0. The survivability rate for our children is 99.99%. This is as per CDC numbers. I'm sure you all know that. Next, in addition, you chose to close our schools last year unnecessarily because of, quote, positive test cases, which mean nothing. Do you know why it means nothing? Because these positive cases are based on faulty PCR testing, which even by the creator, Dr. Kerry Mullis, of the PCR technology, he stated that that should not be used to diagnose any infection. I don't know if you are aware of that, but that's what it is. So next. What about influenza? The CDC estimated that 480 children died of influenza between 2018 and 2019. That's more than died from COVID in the last year and a half. Did anyone on the board at that time recommend masking of our children? Why not? Influenza poses more risk than COVID to our children. Next, there has not been a single case of student-to-teacher transmission in the entire world. Let me repeat that. Not a single case of student-to-teacher transmission in the entire world. So when you all are talking about protecting our children and protecting the teachers, it's a lie. Do you know what it's called when you force children to wear a mask for fear of a virus that causes no harm to them? It's called child abuse. Do you have any idea what kind of physical and psychological damage you are doing to our children by forcing them to cover their faces, thinking that the air is toxic and that everyone around them is sick? You all are dehumanizing our children, and you know this. Your job is to protect our children first and to educate them. You are not elected to do anything else. You are not elected to make medical decisions for our children, including masks and including vaccines. You're not elected to do that. None of you are. None of you are doctors. You know nothing about it. In addition, there is no law or regulation that allows any of you to require our children to wear face masks in school. Your motivations are disgusting. Forcing our children to wear masks to make yourselves feel better and to protect yourselves politically. I will not let the school district mask our children any longer. Forcing our children to wear masks is a symbolic security blanket that has nothing to do with the education of our children.
That is the 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
So very interesting there. Again, another passionate plea, and but I'm just watching that right now. It's hard not to think about the position that all of this is putting families in, and parents in, and children in. For people to be speaking so passionately at meetings and things of that nature means that people are feel like they're being pushed in a direction that they don't want to go in. Mm. It appears like the authorities have far less confidence about the situation than many families do. And unfortunately, families who do feel more confident and comfortable about the situation after following the data are being labeled as being reckless and irresponsible and selfish and things of that nature. So it's a lot of conversation. I know in Beyond the Pandemic, I believe it was in episode 8 or 9 with Dr. Asaran. She said that in the beginning of the pandemic, we were following the data, and she feels that we did a very good job. And then we got to a point where we stopped. And it appears that that's something that's going on all around the world. So I think the purpose of you guys sharing these videos today is not just to show people what is being said, but to show people that there are parents all around the world who are feeling very similar to the way parents are feeling here in Bermuda. So do you guys have any other comments about that last video?
Yeah. So what's your choice? Like, what if you can't win the fight, what is your choice? The only thing left to do is to take your children out of school. Because if you know, like, I love children, I'm a mom, obviously, but I'm very passionate and, you know, health and safety, overall well-being. If I know something that is directly harming, and you know, you make the choice to continue doing that, or you don't, because I see a lot of people now, that is where they're at, taking their kids out of school.
Absolutely. I mean, this is the thing. This is kind of, these are the conversations that I'm having with other mothers. This is the conversation I'm having with my husband currently. Let's face it, and we discussed this earlier, but the school system in Bermuda, like you said, Eugene, we've kind of, they made a very good plea for people to take their kids out of public schools and put them in private schools to get that better education, to get that solid foundation that they need. And now we're at a place where everyone, they're all under the same mandates, which again, we discussed are not, they're not law. They are recommendations or guidelines, as I think they've like to have called them. So why are we forcing our kids if we know better? And here's one thing that the PTA at our school has always said to us: you are your child's biggest advocate.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they say. They preach that. And here I am. I am my child's biggest advocate. My children mean the world to me. I want them to have a good education. And I want them to be healthy, physically, mentally, emotionally, physically, all of that. There shouldn't have to be an and/or situation. It has to be all inclusive. It has to look at the whole well-being of the child and their development and their education and what's going to happen to them long term. If we are not looking at this in a very holistic manner, a whole well-rounded manner, then we are missing a big part of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
Big part of the puzzle. So that's where I'm coming from as a mom. I'm advocating for my children, and who have clearly expressed to me their concerns about having to wear a mask all day. Because as a mom, I've said to them, hey, these are these things you're going to have to, when you go back to school, going to have to do differently. And yeah, we can sit and have these conversations and kind of talk them, but to completely disregard their concerns back, that's not okay with me. So as much as I've seen people on social media say, well, you're the parent, you basically tell them and give them positive reinforcement to say, which is what the government's doing to us, oh, you're doing a good job, you're doing the right thing. So, basically we're telling them, even though we don't know that this is the right thing. And as a mom and someone who I rely on my intuition a lot. Not just what goes on here, but my heart and my gut. Mm-hmm. I try and encompass all of that. And I'm not just going to listen to the government's telling me I should do this, and this is how it has to be. I am those children's parent.
Yeah.
My husband and I, we didn't bring them into the world for the governments to put their guidelines, their recommendations forcibly on my children. I didn't. So that's where me as a mother who has my children's back, who has my children's best interest holistically in mind, I'm going to put them in the right environment so they can succeed in every single fashion, in every single sense of the word. So that is a conversation that I am having with other mothers and with my husband to see what we can do for our children to best support them. Because if I'm going, because I am going to the school, I've emailed, like I said, I've emailed the school, and I have also emailed, sorry, it's my husband knocking on the door. I have also emailed Diallo Robane, and Diallo, because he said on air on Power 95 last week, he actually said that the schools did not close down because of positive cases last school year. They closed down because of close contact cases. So he literally said on air, and I emailed him to clarify that, because I was actually taken aback by that statement that he said he did not, the schools did not close down because of positive cases. And so I said to him, quite frankly, to me, that means you quarantined healthy families, healthy children, healthy families, and you have put the stress and strain of remote learning onto families as well. Parents that were trying to work from home, parents that had to, couldn't work from home and just had to come home and be with their kids to help them learn, or kids that had to just struggle to try and do it on their own.
Yeah. As a, a former public school teacher this time around, not everybody has internet. Not everybody has their own device. And the government does not provide that for people who don't have their own, who don't have that. So to ask people to stay home, that's a little bit, I don't understand, because some people are struggling. If a person's only making $700 a week and they have 3 kids, internet's the last thing from their mind. Maybe they have a phone, but I can guarantee you not every child has their own device. That's very elitist to think that everybody has that. The other thing is, for me, looking at the last 2 videos, the power is in the people. Stand up and say, we're not doing this. You don't have to do it. But what happens is, what's been going on is we've been allowing everybody to do this to us. Now it's time to take your power back. But I know for me personally, a friend of mine called and said, you're not in school now. Are you going to do homeschool? And I'm like, what? Like, I wasn't thinking about that. But now I'm doing a homeschool for 6 children between 7 and 9. With my daughter, we sorted our curriculum. We found a good curriculum that we use, and we lived in China. And I guess that's what we're doing, along with my yoga and meditation and Ayurveda. But I guess that's what we're doing now. And so people have to start to understand that they have the power. You are an sovereign being. You have inalienable rights, and all the governments in the world are trying to take them away from you, but they trump anything. So, put your big girl pants on, get your boxing gloves out, and let's go, because that's the only way we're going to beat this. We all need to stand together and say, this is not good enough for our children. This is not good enough for our community.
Absolutely. And then another thing I want to touch on was the testing. I think, we need to really discuss about the testing of our healthy children. So the screening of them, and then, but I know that they have kind of said this now and they've come out with it, but I was actually taken aback when I found out only last week that if my child was to enter, had my consent to enter into the saliva screening, and their saliva screening came back as a positive, they would then have to have a nasal pharyngeal, the one that goes up your nose, test to then back that up.
But you don't have to, because you could say, I do not consent. I feel that's going to harm me. I do not consent. You could say that. People need to find their power. You have the power. There's no way you can let someone do something to your body that you don't like. And I'm not, making someone do this medical procedure. And don't get me wrong, you're violating someone's body. It's like you're raping someone. You're violating their body. You don't want it. How many of us have seen a video of a 2-year-old getting a PCR test? That's crazy. You're going to let someone do that to your child? No way. 2 years old, and you're poking something up her nose, which you can injure her because she's moving all around and screaming and crying. The mom's looking away because she doesn't know what to do. That's
But this is what they're consenting to. So this is why we have to understand our consent is so powerful.
Right.
Because if we don't consent to it, then it can't happen. And that is what the government has realized. They know that we have the power. They know, but they're trying to ask us very forcefully to consent to this. And quite frankly, they're my children. And I will say when and if they are needed to have that sort of, I will discuss with my medical professionals on their behalf. So I don't think that should be a conversation where the Ministry of Health or the Department of Education should be implying those kind of regulations or recommendations or whatever they like to call them onto my children. That's why they know they have to have the consent of the parent.
And even when you get a letter or something from government asking you, the wording makes you feel like you have to, but you don't have to. You have to sign on a dotted line to say whether you want to do it or not. You don't have to get tested. You don't have to have your children tested. And people are going to say, oh, there are consequences. Yeah, but this is my body. So even though you say there are consequences and, oh, I can't do, but that's called discrimination. That's not right. Because the other coin of this is that you're trying to coerce people into doing what they don't want to do with their bodies. Whether it's a PCR test for your child, whether it's you're telling someone, oh, you can't come to my school because your parents haven't been jabbed, or you haven't been jabbed, or you can't come deliver these items in school because you haven't been jabbed. That's called coercion, and that's illegal. You can't do that to anybody. And so you need to look at the ICCPR to get more information. And Bermuda has signed that document. And people aren't aware of it. It has just as much strength as a Nuremberg Code, which is still in effect, but no one can make you do something that you don't want to do with your body. So hang tight. You guys need to start speaking out.
Another thing I wanted to touch on was, sorry, Jean.
Go ahead. No, that's fine. Go ahead.
On fire, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you get as mamas going, mama bear instincts just, they go, right? But another thing that it was really important to touch on was in the the school guidelines, they have clearly stated in there in phases 3 and 4 that, and this is where I think Ceola Wilson was trying to question Diala Rubain on in the last press conference, but she didn't have all the data to back it up. And I actually went ahead and emailed Diala right afterwards, and I have yet to receive a reply, I don't think. So I'll stay tuned on that. But basically, it literally says under phase 3 and phase 4 that the immunized staff members can use the common areas, so the common staff rooms and things like that. So, but it doesn't say that the unimmunized cannot, but clearly that is outlining that only the immunized staff members. However, it clearly states in the whole document that all of the teachers and staff and faculty need to wear a mask at all times while they're indoors. So are you telling me, if I'm reading this correctly, that you are telling me that you cannot, that unimmunized staff members and faculty members and teachers cannot go into these communal areas, even though all of them, immunized or not, are wearing masks? So are you then telling me the masks do not work?
Oh no, it's saying that, Jean, you got to go down a bit. It also says that the immunized teachers can remove their masks if they want to.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
But
you're right, because it goes against what we've been seeing in our community and communities around the world, where people who have been immunized, because you remember they're not immunized, have been spreading and contacting COVID. So regardless of whether you've had the shot or not, nobody's really safe unless you walk around in a bubble, which you've seen on Walmart videos, right? Unless you're walking around in a bubble, and one thing that I've noticed is that in our society in the last, 10 years, we've been like germaphobes. Why? What happened to letting children play outside in the dirt? So what? They get dirty, you wash them off. Or playing with their dog. Now, you have kids walking around with these small bottles of hand sanitizer, which are toxic to your body. And people don't realize that the hand sanitizer that they make you use in every store, and you could make your own, breaks down the plastics. And most of the plastics have BPA, which will again seep into your body and poison you. And it also has a high effect of you not being able to conceive or have children, because it's a hormone disruptor as well. So having these sanitizers all around the community is not good for your body. I made my own with these oil and I just spray that. But what's wrong with germs? What's wrong with germs? Kids are germy. Okay. And in all honesty, teachers were the healthiest people because we're around germy kids all day. They're always breathing on you and giving you a paper that looks kind of grimy, but yeah, we just need to get back to letting people do what they want with their own bodies and their own families and just minding our own business.
And going back to the masks as well, you know, the children are sneezing into these masks, coughing into the mask, probably, maybe, but more so, they're just breathing into them. They're maybe sucking on them, you know, get bored, suck on it, chew on it, right? So these are all things that we need to consider, is that these are the things that's going to be just breathing back in their own kind of things that they should be able to get out. That's the reason why we cough and sneeze, is to whatever's in there that's irritating, it's to get it out, right? So these are just considerations that we need to really look at, and allowing our bodies and our children's bodies to work in the way that they're supposed to work.
Mm-hmm. And with regards to masks, I remember seeing children wearing the same mask for a week. And one girl had a mask. It was that, I guess, like that polyurethane kind of material, like you would make gym clothes out of. And right here on her mask was black, because her mask was pink. And she was breathing in all of this stuff. And then people wondering why kids had throat infections, or they had, you know, stomach bugs, because they were breathing in this whole stuff. Another boy had ketchup on his mask. And I said, hey, how long you had that mask? He said 3 days. Middle school. Okay. You know, like you said, they're little. And on the other hand, there were other students who were so afraid of breathing. They would ask you, can I go in the hallway to take a breath? And I'm like, what? This is a right for you to breathe. Why are you asking me that? But they have been told that your mask has to be on from 8:30 to 3:30. You cannot breathe unless you go outside in the hallway and ask to remove your mask. What nonsense are we teaching our children? You know?
Yeah, so that was a big question of mine. Like, they're ensuring us that they're going to get mask breaks. What does that look like? Are they going outside? Or are they taking it off and getting a break inside? Because then doesn't that defeat what you're doing from the beginning?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a lot of uncertainty. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree, Megan. Like, we don't really have any guidelines around that. Our principal said the same thing. She said putting into place these mask-free times. Well, okay, so what does that look like? Are they going to be going outside? Are they still going to be inside wearing, having mask breaks? Or and Diallo Robin kind of said, oh, they can take off for like a few seconds. That's what he said in the press conference. Okay, well, that doesn't really seem sufficient to me. Like, maybe he's talking about just bring it down and put it back up. I'm not entirely sure.
And if that's okay, why not for the whole day? Like, what?
Right.
Like, what? Or let's put restaurant tables in every classroom. We could do that instead. As someone said, or let's put restaurant tables. Ta-da! Problem solved. Because we can take our masks off to eat, right? Mm-hmm. Let's pretend, let's just sip some water and have some apple.
Well, here's the funny, I found it quite humorous, and so did my husband. And I don't know where this came from, whether it was all schools were told this by the Ministry of Health, but basically towards the end of last school year, they were told if they were outside, and let's face it, they're going to be outside playing, intermingling, whatever, but if they're sat at the bench, so the little picnic benches that they had to sit opposite each other, not next to each other. So I was scratching my head trying to figure out how that made a difference, because when kids they're sat opposite each other, it's still only a few feet, maybe a foot apart. And then if they're sat next to each other, they're kind of thinking that, oh, well, they would talk this way. We know kids, they're going to turn and speak directly to whoever, so they're even closer to each other.
Yeah.
And I actually found that really, really impractical. And my husband said, what is it? So that was one of the first things that we both said, who approved that?
or like for phase 2, there's no singing. You cannot sing at school. And talked about no yelling or shouting. Well, teachers shouldn't be doing that anyways, but Kids are loud.
Yeah, and what if they're doing an activity in class where it's loud?
You cannot sing at school. And, you know, the all of the guidance and information and studies that have been done to say how important music is for learning.
And look at, like, for me, I worked in a middle school, and all of the creativity was taken out of schools. So art was now on a piece of paper. DT was scaled down. There was no music, that was on a piece of paper. So all the creativity had been taken out of the school. What are we trying to create? Robots that don't talk back? Like, I think we need to look at beyond the mass, but what's it doing to our children? You're trying to break them? They're not in the army. These are children. These are the people that we have to protect. And this is not protecting them. Like I don't get it, you know? But then on the other hand, in the last year, when you have the news every night, open the paper every day, everything's about COVID. The biggest picture you see is stop watching the newspaper, watching the TV, stop reading, because it just fills so many people with fear that they follow along with what government wants to. So we need to start using our brains and start thinking, just like you said, with your heart and your intuition. You know, what does your heart tell you?
All of these educators do this for a reason, for passion, for loving and educating children. They need to really question the things that they're doing. You know, my daughter was punished last year, given detentions for taking a breath, for trying to breathe. They need to stand, people need to start standing up. And like I said in the beginning, if you are afraid, do the things to protect yourself then, and then move on with it. If there are people that don't agree, let them have that choice. If you do what you feel is going to protect you, just let it be a choice and let people choose the things that they want for their children. Because again, at the end, who is going to be responsible if something goes wrong? If there's a long-term illness effect, who's going to be responsible, liable for those damages?
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Mama bear intuitions kick in, right? And that's why we have them.
Well, yeah, it's good conversation. I think that that's probably the primary concern, what you said, Megan. You know, who is going to be responsible?
I saw one of the
something happens.
Affording homeschool. So that's another thing. Bermuda is a very expensive place. And a lot of families, or if you're a single mom and you have to work to provide for your family, or if it's, you know, two income home and they both have to work to provide for their family, what choices are people being given, you know, to homeschool? You know, some people would have a curriculum, depending on the age and yada, yada, yada. But what choices are people being given? Not many. And, you know, hopefully there'll be some collaboration for people that have had enough and maybe are going to walk away, ways that we can support each other. You know, if it's not something you can afford, well, you know, let's, as a community, come together, you know, stop these divides and work together to find a solution to keep our children healthy and safe and protected.
Well, I think that's an important point that you're making there. And homeschooling definitely is an option that some people can look to. I think the concern would be around the people who are not able to go down that road. I heard you mention that about people who both have jobs and are working all day, every day, being able to find a way to, you know, have someone who's going to care for the children while you're at work will become a challenge if you stop your children from going into school. But just to the point about, you know, what are we going to do? Is somebody going to set something up and things of that nature? I think the shift needs to be more around like, what are we going to do? So for any parents that are concerned, you know, what choices are you going to make? It doesn't appear that anyone is going to hand you options yourself. I feel like everyone's going to have to find the means within themselves to network, to collaborate, to source options, to actually make something happen. And for anyone who's in the private school system, you're actually paying for a service. So why would you pay for something that you're not in agreement with? You know, so that begs a real question for persons who are in private schools. If you find yourself at odds with the mandates, with the procedures that are being taken in your school, then do you pay for that? You know, because I haven't heard from anyone that anyone's going to be getting a discount as a result of how the education system is compromised by all the mandates that are in place, by the missed days in school and things of that nature. People are still, to my understanding, paying full price. You know, so that's something that we're going to have to think about. And then the other thing is that, you know, you have the people who are on the side of the equation of saying that, well, I'm still just very afraid. And, you know, my concern is if we allow parents who are concerned about masks to send their children to school and my child gets infected, then who's responsible for that? You know? So that's where we have to find a way to bridge this and to find healing. And, you know, the start of that would be having conversations. You know, what I get a sense from all the conversation that you guys have had is that the real failing here is the absence of any collaboration, the absence of any outreach to parents, to teachers, you know, the absence of any networking or collaboration with families and communities to find something that not just addresses the concerns of one group, whilst, you know, totally disappointing and dismissing another, but finding solutions that actually address the concerns of all. And that's the challenge that we're going to face in this situation. So by all means, those persons who have options, you know, be encouraged to take those options. And persons who are challenged to find options, then network and dig deeper and let's see what type of solutions we can make. And if you feel like you're totally dependent on the school system, then it's important to make a stand. Because again, you know, whether you're paying directly or indirectly, either through private school or through taxes that contribute to private education, you know, then you are paying. And so you have the right to have an input into the process. So that's my thoughts on it. Yeah, Claire, I see you nodding your head. Yeah. Any final comments or words from you?
So basically, just, you know, I agree with you, Eugene. We need to have more conversations. We need to have more collaborations. We need to be heard as parents and as educators. We need to be the advocates that our children deserve, and also understand each other's viewpoints, because we're not all going to agree. We're not all going to see eye to eye on everything, but having that compassion for other people and listen to everyone's concerns and legitimate questions that we have. And this is it. This is why we're here today, is because we have questions and we want to know what this is all going to look like. We want to know who's liable if anything happens to our children. We want answers. And it's really unfair to put these kind of mandates out there without giving us all the information required.
Oh, I'm sorry. Any other comments, Megan?
No, what Claire said.
Just what Claire said? Well, we have some comments here. I see the comment is that this COVID has divided us. And I think everyone can agree that that's been a very sad situation. And then the term anti is constantly being thrown around. This, whether it's anti-mask or anti-vax or And, you know, I find that is really unfair because, you know, what's happened now is that as soon as you question something or question anything, you're considered to be anti. And that's not really the case at all. You're not really anti. You just are looking for an opportunity to give input into situations that affect you directly or affect your family and your children directly. And so you're leaning more on being for choice, and not just choice for yourself and those who agree with you, but choice for everyone. And that's something that Megan has been reiterating the entire time, you know, so that is a very valid point. Welcome back, Tracey. And quarantine is when you're restricted the movement of sick people. Tyranny is when you restrict the movement of healthy people. So this is drawing a lot out of the community. People are having to ask a lot of different questions, and people obviously doing a lot of research because they're unhappy. And that's why, you know, I really have come to the conclusion that the real failing in all of this is the lack of collaboration and the lack of communication, because a lot of this could be avoided if people felt like they had a genuine opportunity to give input, that they were listened to, that they were understood, and that decisions were being made while taking their concerns or their suggestions into consideration. You know, that's another thing. Is remote learning an option if you do not want to wear the mask? I haven't heard anyone say that, Tracey.
I don't think they're going to do that because that requires two different. I don't think so.
No, they have said it's possible. And one of the government talks they had done back in May, I believe it was, and they said no, it's not an option. Either your kid's in school or they're not. If they are sick for like a prolonged time because of whatever, they can join via Zoom. But let's face it, we know that the schools are not set up and they're not geared for that. So I don't see that being legitimate, that they could do it, but they have basically said you do not have that option. Your child is either in school or they're not, and that's what
pretty
it is.
much it.
Yeah, right. And I know with public schools they do not have the technological resources to do that. That, you know, I had to use my own computer. Nobody provides you a computer. Nobody provides you with, here's some money for your Wi-Fi. No, you have because they don't have that. And even within the school, even if you are teaching in the school for whatever reason, not all of the computers have Zoom or that sort of technology based on it, and then they haven't been updated. I'm telling you, public school technology, I always say, is 1984 because it's way behind. It's not really not fair to the students. Yeah,
right.
1984.
Right. So we have another question. It's for the children whose parents don't want them to wear masks, is there someone who can homeschool them? Is this possible? So what I would say is that I'm not sure that there's anyone from government who will be coming out to homeschool your children or from the private schools, but you can certainly source persons from in the broader community to assist with the homeschooling of your children.
And this is the time where the community has to come. Sorry.
Those are conversations we're having, and there are people collaborating on that.
Yeah, there really is. Like I said, someone came to me.
We're having a meeting this afternoon. Some moms that, you know, are looking at possibly homeschooling.
So reach out to us, and we can help in any way possible.
Yeah.
And this also is a time where we have to understand, you know, the phrase, you know, it takes a village. So now in your village, find teachers who can do certain things, and families need to come together because teachers need to be paid, right? And you don't want to do it for free. Everybody comes together to pay that person or persons to teach your children. But it just takes some people to come up and work together and come up with the, you know, the know-how to do it. It's really not that hard. But we can't keep on giving our power away. Is basically what it comes down to, in my opinion.
It's sad that it's come to this, though, and it's the whole situation. You know, when you look at, like, when I look at my love for children and passion for children, it's like the whole thing is a bit strange. You know, the harms and dangers, they've been overlooked. And it's sad to see that continue, and that people are this, they just have to walk away. But there's different views on homeschooling, unschooling. I can say last year, kids have been through enough. My daughter was, made to watch the news at school to continue that fear mongering in children. And it's like, they've been through enough. Let them be kids. Go to school, learn about things, fine. It's hard to see that fear pushed and instilled in children after everything that they've gone through.
Yeah. And I think, looking at children in middle school, kids who are like 9, 10, they're still looking for a parental figure to tell them what to think and how to go. But the other kids between 11 and 14, they're like, this is nonsense. We're not doing this. because they've done other research, they've listened to other things, and they found other information. But the small kids are still very much able to be molded into what they want. Is that what you want for your child? That's what you need to ask. If that's not what you want for your child, then you have to change that as a parent. Because up to the age of 10, they just, they do whatever.
Really doing at this? What do you want for your child? What do you want them to be at the end of the day? And what's happening to them right now? How is that going to affect them long term? And is that what you want, like an environment where you can't sing or you can't do all things? It's all, you can't do this, you can't do that. And for what? For something that isn't affecting children. You can look at the statistics and the rates, and the children that do become ill, the survival rate, and the majority of illnesses that are, that the symptoms are manageable. So,
and those kids were already really sick. Maybe they already had cancer, or they had some other, disease that when they caught COVID, but
yeah, that's a big part of a lot of the deaths in children. There were comorbidities. As far as the statistics, I know not one healthy child has died from COVID.
The thing about it is that people don't even realize that, yes, we're living under a medical dictatorship. And if you say it on Facebook, people just start to go for you. But I've said it. People don't realize that there is somewhere where you can look for the information. You can look at VAERS, you can look for the yellow card. There's also Vigi Access, which is for Europe. And if you've had a reaction from not COVID, but the shot, it tells you all that. And more people have died, this is another conversation though, died from the shot than actual COVID. So what are we doing? What are we doing?
And where's our statistics on that in Bermuda? Where once have you seen any sort of data from our government or that has said any sort of adverse reaction from these shots? This is a whole nother topic that we could go into, and I think we're going to keep this for another day.
Yeah.
But I just want to make that point. I just feel like there's so much information that's being withheld that if you don't ask for it, you don't get it.
Yeah. And Sophia's right. She's saying here the system is crumbling. It's not working. It's not. And this is why now they're coming for the children. Because you lot, as your adults, you didn't do what we told you. And you know what? You're going to feel now, because now we're going to come for your kids. We're going to mask your kids all day. We're telling you that the kids now can get it, and you have to give them the shot between 12 and 15. That's not normal. If this thing was so dangerous, we wouldn't all be walking in the streets. You would find people dead lying in the streets. You wouldn't have the same neighbor that you have now, that you've been talking to and spending time with. It's not that dangerous. But they've made it think it was so dangerous that people are afraid to breathe. That's just...
I saw a quote that said, something along the lines of, this is a disease so prevalent that we have to be tested to know that we even have it, right. And so deadly that but the survival rate, I can't remember the exact thing, but I'll try and find it. But the survival rate is way higher than the death rate. And, you know, those are things that we need to consider and look at, right?
Yeah. Basically, I think we just need to come together as a community and sort this out. Stop letting them create the division, because division has already been created, whether it was, you know, talking about races, and then now it's vaxxed and unvaxxed. So now we have to stop that and come together and to protect the children and find a way for us to do things in that's good for our soul and not for anybody else.
Yeah, if you look at the division, you know, it was political, then race.
Mm-hmm.
It's continued, but
Yeah,
people are easier to control when they're divided.
yes, exactly.
It's time for the people that, you know, are really looking at the overall well-being for children to do what they need to do to protect and keep them healthy and safe. Because, you know, if these things are going to be continued to be overlooked, like I said, there's what other options do we have?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be able to have a choice.
And this is just the beginning, because let's face it, some people are like, well, we're doing the right thing by keeping them safe, you know, so they don't get this disease and all of that sort of stuff. But this is just the beginning of the mandates or the guidelines or whatever you want to call them that they're imposing on on our children. What's the next step?
Right.
What's the next thing? What, you know, if we allow them to, we blindly allow them to put these guidelines onto our children, they're going to keep pushing the envelope. Oh, they complied. Oh, they didn't push back. Oh, they didn't have questions.
Yeah.
Then they're going to keep putting more and more and more on our children. So this is a time that we stop and say, hold up, we have questions. We need them. We need answers. And we have concerns and they need to be heard.
Yeah, so like even in Bermuda, like you see all these videos of these school board meetings. We never got that. We never got to have a platform to speak.
It's do what I say.
There have been some Zoom calls by the looks of, there was one, but I will be honest with you. I get an email from with the scoop letter, and it's basically what they want to impress upon us, what they want to tell us. But they never say this is the next time we're actually meeting to discuss such and such a thing. So they have these discussions, and yes, they probably put it out once, and whoever happens to catch it, great. But we're so inundated and so busy that we don't always have that ability. And then they post it on their YouTube or whatever, but again, don't send out the follow-up and say, hey, by the way, anyone that missed it, this is what we discussed. If you have any questions. I mean, so there are some things, and I will say that the commissioner's office does have a survey link with questions, concerns, and all that sort of stuff. And so I have been utilizing that. I have been sending my questions and concerns to the commissioner's office, to the Commissioner of Education, Kamala Richardson, to her office, and saying, these are my concerns, these are my questions that I have, and I'm sorry to inundate you with some emails, but I have the right to know. And so there are ways that we can communicate with them. It would be great if they then said, okay, there's clearly concerns here. How can we address them? How can we
replies?
I have gotten replies. Yes, I have. Not from Kamala Richardson herself, but from I.O. Johnson. I have gotten replies from him.
What is his role?
He's like their communications officer, I suppose. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would be interested to know who is coming up with these. Who's actually giving the
health ministry. Yeah,
the Minister of Health. But
I think they're taking their directives from where?
Background. So she must be getting the information from somebody else. So where is that person getting this information to come up with these things like you can't sing or speak loudly anymore at school, or you can't play instruments, and you can take it off now outside. Last year you couldn't. You have to wear it, like The younger ones have to wear it walking around, but when they sit down, they can take it off, but the older ones can't. Where are these actual age groups? Like, because last year it was middle school and up. Now it's from P4 in phase 2. Phase 1 goes to P1 and up. So where, depending on the case, like who is making this information?
Oh yeah, because now it doesn't depend on how old you are, and even if we're at a case where funny word, even where we're in a system where there are no cases, the children still have to wear masks, all of them. We have to be 28 days free. You know that ain't gonna happen because COVID's like a flu; it's gonna change all the time. So in other words, you were saying okay to your child being masked until the rest of their educational career. Yeah. So now's the time to act. And if you cannot take your child out for whatever reason, then start using your community. There's more than one person who doesn't agree with this, that you know, your child's friends. Surely they've all had something to say about it now. Yeah. Get together, form a group, and start doing some work, finding out what your inalienable rights are and how you're going to take your power back.
Yeah, I think people just need to really speak up on how they feel, whatever place you're at. If for whatever reason, if you feel like you've done everything they've told you to do, but why do I still have to do this? Or you know about the potential harms, dangers, and long-term effects, or the, you know, you've looked at some of the data on the effectiveness. If just people need to start speaking up and coming together, and making a stand.
Right. Well, I'd like to thank you, ladies, for speaking up today. You guys have been a really good example. There's a lot of conversation about speaking up in the community, how important it is for us to make our voices heard. And unfortunately, we haven't had as many examples of that as we would have liked to see. So today, I really appreciate the fact that you guys have set a positive example. You've gone out on the limb. You've spoken very openly and genuinely about a topic that is concerning to many. And hopefully you doing this helps to inspire others to have more conversations, and not just have conversations, but to act. So to everyone who's tuned in today, thank you very much for joining us. If you are interested in participating in community conversations, you can email us at info@beyondthepandemic.tv. And I just want to let you know there's been a lot of conversation and questions in the comments about homeschooling. And so we've thought of that already. And we're planning in the next day or two to have another interview with some parents who have already homeschooled their children, to give insights to parents who are showing interest in doing that now. So with that said, I would like to just encourage everyone, be encouraged by what's happened today. Stand firm. There is hope. There are options. For some, it may be a lot easier than others, but where there's commitment and where there's a will, then there's always a way. And I know that just like with work, school is a similar scenario. So, you know, we get this confidence from having our children in a school system because that has been said to be the standard. And then there's this inherent fear of around stepping away from that, because what does it look like outside of that system that we've all become accustomed to? And all I can say is that I know a lot of children. I know even my daughter was homeschooled at a young age. And when she finally did enter into a structured school system, then she really excelled. And, you know, I personally know of a lot of people who have just been with their parents through all their formative years. And when they've eventually gone into the workforce or into university and things of that nature, they have done exceptionally well. So I haven't seen situations where people being outside of a school system and being with a loving and caring family that keeps their curiosity and their interest in learning alive. I haven't seen where there's been any downfall in that. And no, they may not learn every subject. You don't have to know calculus and every little thing, because none of us even paid attention in all those classes in school anyway.
Or use it now.
Yeah, right. Or even still understand it.
Right. So what we learned, though, is that after going through school, we were given tools that gave us the capacity to learn. And once we had that capacity to learn, we recognized that we can learn anything that we wanted to learn. You can always learn if you have the tools to continue to learn more. So again, thank you, ladies, for coming out today. I'm going to give you an opportunity to just give closing comments. But before you do that, I just want to remind everyone that, yes, in the next day or two, we are planning to have another episode with mothers who have homeschooled to answer all the questions of mothers who are looking into that now. So I'll start with you, Claire. Any brief closing comments?
Just to, parents, this is your chance to really be the advocate for your child. And if you have questions, speak up. If you have concerns, speak up. If you have a gut feeling that something is not right, speak up. Just listen to your intuition. As mama bears and papa bears, we have it for a reason. So lean into that and know that there's others around you as well that are doing the same.
Thank you very much, Claire. Megan, you're up next. Any closing comments and advice?
Not really. I don't know. I think I've spoken to everything that I wanted to today. Just, kind of what Claire said. Speak up. Let's stand together.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Megan. And thank you for speaking up today. Yes. And Tracey, any closing comments or advice?
Yes, let's get back to creating a community and supporting each other and living with our hearts. What's important to you. Having the best friend and the biggest house is not going to make you a better person. The graves both look the same. So take your power back. Find out how you can give your child and everyone else a better life, because it's about everybody at this time.
All right. Thank you, Tracey. And again, thank you to all the ladies, and thank you to everyone who joined us today. This has been a really great conversation. I'm sure that everyone who's been watching, and for those who have the opportunity to watch it later, that they will really gain a lot of knowledge from what's been shared here today, but hopefully even more so than that, a lot of inspiration to stand for what they recognize to be in the best interests of their family and their children. So give thanks, everyone. Peace and love.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eugene.